Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from Not the Commander's Core Studio. Once again, welcome to the show. So on today's episode, I'm going to be taking you through my picks for the best brand new cards from Murders at Karlov Manor. Now that we've got the full set and the precons, what cards should you be considering for some of your decks in the new set? So with all that said, let's jump into it. First up, we've got Case of the Uneaten Feast, a very, very good card in Enchantment Case, which is a brand new card type, essentially. For a single white mana, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. That's already an amazing effect that we see on, I think it's like a Johnny's Presence or something like that. Basically, already going to be good in a life gain strategy, but on top of that, it says, to solve, you've gained 5 more life this turn. That's very easy to do. I mean, even just with that first part, essentially for the right deck out there. And of course with other life gain combinations. But of course, solved, sacrifice this case, creature cards in your graveyard gain. You may cast this card from your graveyard until end of turn. Basically a mass, not reanimation because you don't have to pay for those creatures, but yeah, being able to essentially utilize your graveyard as a secondary hand for those creatures, that is huge. So yeah, life gain strategies are absolutely going to love a card like this, especially ones that maybe have some low to the ground creatures that they can get back, like a couple of Soul Sisters probably. Could be quite fun. Moving on. Unyielding Gatekeeper. This one I think is really cool. A 3/2 Elven Cleric for just 2 mana. Disguise for 1 and a white. When it's turned face up, exile another target non-land permanent. If you controlled it, return to the battlefield tapped. So a blink effect, essentially, you can use and abuse other ETBs, essentially, with this, which is fantastic. But it is flexible in that it says, otherwise, its controller creates a 2/2 white and blue detect creature token. Essentially, hey, get rid of any non-land permanent on the board. Anything. And replace it just with a 2/2. So either a great blank effect for you, some value to be had, or again, fantastic removal for you. Next up, Wojek Investigator, a 2/4 Angel Detective with Flying and Vigilance for 3 mana. Give your upkeep, investigate once for each opponent who has more cards in hand than you. So yeah, that is quite a bit. Again, essentially, you are in potentially mono white when you're utilizing this card, and this is a low to the ground, evasive creature that can swing and block, and also, yeah, hey, potentially investigate 3 times, get 3 clues. What's not to love about that? So whether you're in a mono white deck and you might be struggling for card advantage compared to opponents, this can help you try to catch up, of course. So you have to pay to actually sacrifice those. Or maybe you've got an artifact-based strategy and you're like, yeah, let's just get a lot of artifacts into play, potentially 3 per turn. Could be even more, again, if you've got doubling effects or if you've got, like Academy Manufacturer to give you different kinds of tokens too. So quite good. Next up, No Witnesses. Very simple, very effective. Basically a Wrath of God minus the no regeneration, which, yeah, is technically worse, but come on, how many creatures out there actually regenerate? Not really many at all when you are really looking at it in a game of Commander, but it does say each player controls the most creatures investigate. So it is a Wrath that could potentially benefit you slightly for wiping the board if you have a go wide strategy. So if you're like, okay, I have a good amount of creatures out there, but like there's just some really heavy hitters out there. I've got a lot of 1/1 tokens. Let's just wipe the board. I'll get a clue. Cool. There we go. Moving on, let's go into blue. Lost in the Maze. An enchantment for X blue. Flash enters the battlefield. Tap X star creature, place stun counter each of those creatures you don't control. Tap creature control of hexproof. Again, we're starting to get more of these kind of like variable picks. Ones that can actually help you or hurt an opponent. Ones that are flexible and value oriented. Again, this one, hey, you flash it in. It's an enchantment. Great. Let's get it down there. Let's stun a couple of our opponent's creatures. And again, you can do that like right before their combat. You're like, hey, where are you going with those creatures, huh? Or you can set someone else up to essentially fail by tapping down the creatures, get someone else to be able to get through on them essentially. Or you can protect your own creatures. Again, there's that flexibility too, where if someone's targeting one of your creatures, you're like, let's save my creature. I'll tap it down. Again, it's not getting a stun counter on it, and it's also got a hexproof. Again, just having tap creature control of hexproof is really good for certain decks out there that might have maybe a commander or certain key creatures in the deck that have tap activated abilities. So this is just basically like, oh yeah, in my Garth deck, like, hey, oh cool, I can utilize it to get rid of my opponent's creatures, or I can just have it in play to be like, oh, you're trying to target my commander, tap my commander with its own ability, and all of a sudden, no more. Next up, props. Ectic Memory, an legendary enchantment for 2 mana. enters the battlefield, draw a card. You have a maximum hand size already right there. That again replaces itself, gives you a maximum hand size. That's already a great card. On top of that, though, beginning of combat your turn, if you've drawn more than one card this turn, put X counters on target creature controller, X the number of cards you draw on this turn -1. That could be an absurd amount of counters. Obviously, this can play well into proliferate, other counter synergies. Certain creatures out there like a Fathom Mage are like, hey, you want to get counters on me? This happens. Or, yeah, just saying like, oh, cool, yeah, I just happen to draw a lot of cards. Oh, yeah, let's make my commander massive and swing and hit my opponents. But again, drawing a card to replace itself and also just giving you maximum hand size is already huge, and that is just icing on top of the cake for the extra counters. Moving on. Unauthorized Exit. This is an interesting one. We start to see more and more of these types of effects lately. Instant for 2 mana, 1 and a blue, balance a non-land permanent back to its owner's hand. So that's essentially the usual cost that you're going to have to pay for that effect. There's other variables to it where it's like, oh, if it's your own permanent, it just costs 1, like an Alchemist Retrieval, or like, you know, an extra benefit whenever you're targeting your thing versus opponent's thing. Sure, this one just gives you a strip, though, Surveil 1, which is fantastic card selection. Certain decks out there would like to get certain things into their graveyard, or again, you're just getting a dead card off the top of your library. Surveil, and for the most part, is better than Scry, just because, yeah, usually using your graveyard more than the bottom of your library. That being said, again, just a nice other option, again, for like, okay, I want removal in blue. This is another good one to add to the mix to say, okay, do I care about my graveyard? Do I care about the top of my library? If you do, definitely a good one to consider. Moving on, Case the Ransack Lab for 3 mana. Already, again, a case that just gives you an incredible benefit just to start. Instant source spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Even if this was just that, you'd already see play with that. This is like, what's the, is it one? The Goblin costs, it's a 2/2 that reduces your sorceries by 1. Whatever that one's called. My brain's not working right now for that, but being able to cause your instant sorceries low to the ground, and again, being on an enchantment versus a creature, that is huge. Like a Jace's Sanctum, minus that second part, but also, again, the potential to solve. You've cast 4 or more instant source spells this turn. You can definitely do that once you have cost reducers in play, especially if you got a spell slinger type strategy. You can pretty easily get to that. Once you do as well, my goodness, whenever you cast instant source spell, draw a card. That is absurd. Like that one Archmage Emeritus or whatever it is, essentially, but without the copying. But yeah, an absurd amount of value to be had with this. Again, just a 3 mana enchantment that can also reduce, and on top of that, again, replace the cards that you are casting. That is absolutely crazy good. Next up, speaking of crazy good, Forensic Gadgeteer. 2/3 Vidalcan Artificer Detective for 3 mana. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, investigate. Gross. I mean, my first thought was like my Joyru deck, which we don't talk about the deck anymore. We don't play that deck anymore. But yeah, being able to throw us in an artifact-centric deck, yes, please. Being able to just make an artifact every single time you cast an artifact, that is massive. That is huge. And on top of that, activated abilities of artifacts you control cost 1 to activate, can't reduce less than 1. Yeah, and all of a sudden your clues, instead of being like pay 2 to draw, which is not all that efficient, paying 1 to draw, yes, please. Absolutely crazy. Basically, hey, when you cast an artifact spell, whatever you want later on down the road, just pay 1, draw a card. Absurd amounts of card potential with that. And of course, it also reduces the cost of any other activated abilities of artifacts you might have. Maybe you have a commander that has an activated ability that is an artifact. Yeah, definitely want to keep in mind. Next up, let's go on to black. Snarling Gore Hound. If you've got a low-to-the-ground creature-based strategy, this one can be huge. A 1/1 dog with menace for a single black mana. Whenever the creature power 2 or less enters battlefield under control, Surveil 1. Again, I talked about earlier, Surveil is not card advantage, but it's fantastic card selection. Again, being able to get things in your graveyard can be huge, especially in black for certain strategies. Think an aristocrat style with this one, where you're just getting a bunch of small tokens into play. Again, this does not specify non-token creatures. So again, you make all those like 1/1 spirits, 1/1 soldiers, whatever you're making to do zombies. It counts those, and all of a sudden, again, you are able to get a ton of things off the top of your library into your graveyard, filter the top of your library to get the cards that you need, and yeah, do a lot of crazy things with this. Of course, Shizo's Caretaker also would love this card, again, with a commander that can get creatures into play again and again and again. They're low power. Yeah, this is a very, very, very good common. Next up, Case that Skeleton, a really cool card. Another case. I really like the design of these cases, if you couldn't tell. For 1 and a black, enters the battlefield, create a 2/1 black skeleton creature token and suspect it. Has menace, can't block. To solve, you control no suspected skeletons. So, again, there are plenty of ways to get rid of this. Obviously, you can't block with it, but you could swing in combat and hope that your opponents do block it. Maybe you can make a deal. Like, again, if you're like, hey, need to solve this case for all of us because that player over there is going crazy, and the part of this case is, again, you solve it by paying, or once it is solved, you can pay 1 a black, sacrifice it, go get any card out of your library, essentially, and yeah, activate on sorcery speed. Basically, a demonic tutor, diabolic tutor more so, I guess I should say, because you're 4 mana in total with this. You do have some steps to get there, but again, getting that skeleton can just be nice. Again, if you're in a aristocrat style strategy, cool, let's make a creature token. You got ways to sacrifice it, obviously, so sacrifice it so you can actually solve the case. And then, yeah, utilize it whenever you want, again, at demonic tutor cost to go essentially tutor. I said whenever you like, but again, sorcerer speed. You know what I mean? A very, very good tutor for the right deck. Next up, Presumed Dead. We are getting more and more and more of these Feigned Death type effects. Again, it seems like Wizards is leaning more into 2 mana being the amount that they want for these with like an additional effect. That being said, it's a good one. Instant for 1 in black. Till a turn, target creature gets +2/+0 and gains when this creature dies, turn to the battlefield under its own control and suspect it. So again, that can actually be a benefit in some ways. Like, okay, I don't really care about blocking with that creature. It's about to die. I want to get it back. Get an ETB out of it, get a death trigger out of it, whatever it is, essentially that Feigned Death type effect, which is fantastic. Kind of like a protection spell in black in a way, but also when it comes back, give me even deadlier. Again, having Menace can be a very, very, very good thing for some key creatures out there. Next up, Barbed Servitor. Oh, spicy. A 1/1 construct with Indestructible for 4 mana. Enters the battlefield suspected. Again, Menace can't block. Whenever it deals combat to a player, draw a card and you lose 1 life. Fantastic. And whenever it's dealt damage, target opponent loses that much life. So this one is a card draw engine, essentially, because, well, your opponents aren't going to want to block it. It's indestructible. Your opponents aren't going to be able to block it very effectively, because when they do, yeah, you're probably going to either make that player or others lose life. I mean, obviously, you could just make some deals with that player, be like, hey, you know what, why don't you just team block this, and I'll make that player over there who's annoying the both of us lose a ton of life, so you can do that. Or, again, if that player doesn't block it, you're getting through it, you're drawing a card. 1 life for 1 card is no big deal at all. This is that kind of stuffy doll type card where, yeah, you can very, very, very easily deal, 13 damage to it with a certain card out there that sees a heavy amount of play. And, yeah, a lot of other, damage-based board wipes can just dish out a lot of damage to this, dish damage to an opponent's face, and just do a lot of crazy things. Speaking of crazy, though, Elicit Masquerade. This one's spicy. Enchantment for 4 mana, flash, enters the battlefield, get an imposter counter to each creature you control. Whenever creature you control the imposter counter on it dies, exile, return to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Kind of a really weird, like, mass reanimation type effect, where, again, you can flash this in. Having an enchantment that has this kind of effect with flash is huge in that you can determine when it's going to happen. It's kind of like board wipe protection. It's like, okay, I've got a bunch of these creatures in play again, and it doesn't specify non-tokens, so it's like, okay, I've got a bunch of creature tokens in play, whatever. I flash this in, I get those counters on every single one of them, essentially, all my creatures. They get taken out by, again, a Wrath of God board wipe, whatever it is, and all of a sudden, I replace them with my creature graveyard. So, yeah, you could have some massive plays with this, some big turnaround plays with that. You can also set yourself up with something like this. Again, if you are in a aristocrat style strategy, you're like, oh, cool, okay. Yeah, I'll get this on my creatures. I'll sacrifice those, replace them with something even bigger, even more effective. I'm sure there's some combos you can do this with too. It's a very, very good card. Again, board wipe protection / mass reanimation. A really cool and spicy and effective card. Oh, speaking of which, Vein Ripper. My goodness, they went really, really far with this one. A 6/5 flying vampire assassin for 6 mana. Ward, sacrifice a creature. That's a huge cost. On top of that, whenever a creature dies, target opponent loses life and you gain 2 life. Basically a big threatening blood artist, essentially, that is hard to deal with. Yeah, I mean, basically a doubled up blood artist where you're like, hey, okay, creatures die and I'm draining you a ton. Again, 2 per each one. That is massive. Again, aristocrat style strategies, vampire decks, assassin decks are going to love this card as well. And just ones that, can just edict decks, essentially take out a lot of your opponent's creatures. Really good things can happen with this one. Next up, Connecting the Dots, a very strange enchantment for 1 and a red. Whenever creature control attacks, exile the top card of your library face down, pay 1 a red, discard your hand, sacrifice it, put all cards exiled with it into their owner's hands. Okay, so basically kind of like storing up a hand, again, just on attack. It's not like get combat damage on an opponent. It's not like Coastal Piracy, essentially, in that way. It's just like, no. Just swing. When you are swinging, for every one of your swinging creatures, let's exile the top card of your library, save it off to the side, and then say, you know what? When I want to replace my hand with that, I will. You got to be careful with this one, though, because you don't want to tap out, not have mana for that, and then all of a sudden, opponent just gets rid of it. Nature's claims it, whatever, they get rid of it, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, I just exile those cards for nothing, and now I've got no plan. So yeah, make sure you're careful with this one, though. But again, for the right deck, this can be very interesting, especially one that's going to be aggressive, attack a lot, maybe have extra combats, crazy stuff like that. Next up, one of the most played cards from the set, probably, in my opinion, Demand Answer is an instant for 1 and a red. Additional cost, cast spell, sacrifice an artifact or discard a card, draw 2 cards. This is just a strictly better versions of other cards that we've already seen, like Tormenting Voice, those kinds of cards. Essentially, they strictly better version than other really good cards that already see a lot of play, because again, it gives you an option unlike those do. The other ones are basically like, hey, yeah, discard a card, draw 2. Already good, even at sorcery speed we've seen before, like Tormenting Voice, I believe sorcery speed. We've also seen an instant version of that, but now we see instant version that also gives you the option to, instead of discard a card, sacrifice an artifact, which you might not always have the option to do that, and that's okay. But when you do, it's like, oh yeah, I've got like a clue in play. Sure, I'll sacrifice that, or a treasure or whatnot. You sacrifice something that doesn't mean as much as that card in your hand. So you're basically 2 mana, in speed, draw 2 with very low downside on the sacrifice effect. And again, it's got that flexibility, so you're not just stuck if you don't have an artifact in play. In my opinion, going to be one of the most played cards out of this set. Next up, Expedited Inheritance, enchantment for red. Whenever a creature is dealt damage, the controller may exile that many cards to top their library. They may play those cards until the end of their next turn. This is a crazy card. This is a really cool, really crazy card that is just off the wall and just kind of obnoxious in some ways, because again, if you have a Blasphemous Act go off, everyone's like, okay, I exile, 39 cards off the top of my library. Yeah, let's go with that. So you can have some really big, really crazy plays with this. Again, it is a May, so you're not going to like mill players with this. They can choose still. But yeah, some massive, huge plays, again, for any player can essentially happen with this. Yeah, some interesting plays for sure. Moving on, Vengeful Tracker. Finally, we're starting to get some treasure hate. A little bit. Keep it up, Wizards, please. A 2/2 human detective for 2 mana. Whenever opponent sacrifice an artifact, 2 damage to them. That's a lot. I mean, 2 damage per sacrifice artifact is a lot. Again, making it so that, hey, if you are going to sacrifice those treasures for mana, you need to pay for it. Basically, a shock on every single one, which is huge. Obviously, this counts other artifacts as well, but mostly, again, this is like treasure hate. Sure, again, works against clues, works against food. It's kind of weird with food where it's like, okay, they gain 3 life, lose 2, they gain 1. But yeah, being able to punish treasures in a way is important, and this is one way to do it. Next up, one way not to punish treasure and do the exact opposite is Crime Novelist. Goodness, Wizards. Yeah, first up, this is not an uncommon. This effect is nowhere near uncommon. We also didn't need this card. A 1/3 Goblin Bard for 3 mana. Whenever you sacrifice an artifact, put a counter on it and had red. Gross. It's another one of those like Corvold type cards where it's like, why did it need the counter? It didn't need that at all to be so good and so powerful in this day and age of Magic. Where again, hey, whenever you sacrifice an artifact, oh, cool. Yeah, like a treasure. Sacrifice that for mana. Also get a counter on this. Also get an extra free red mana. So now your your treasures give you 2 mana essentially instead of 1, kind of like that one dragon, the Goldspan dragon, I think it is. It's a crazy good effect. And again, doesn't just apply to treasure, it applies to anything. So again, you sacrifice a clue for 2 mana, you get 1 mana back. Or sacrifice food, whatever, everything else essentially. A crazy, powerful, crazy good card. Not surprised to see this one already like $6 or $7. Again, the set hasn't actually come out yet, but still, it is going to be an expensive uncommon. Moving on. Incinerator the Guilty, a 6/6 Flampling Dragon for 6 mana. Deals combat damage to a player. You may collect evidence X when you do. Deals X damage to each creature and each planeswalker that player controls. This is a repeatable board wipe on a decent body. Again, 6/6 Flying Trample for 6 mana. That's already pretty good. And then, yeah, just again, a one-sided board wipe potentially. If you're playing in a dragon tribal deck, of course, yeah, you're going to have other dragons that have a good amount of mana value. And you're like, oh, cool, yeah, I'll exile this 8-mana dragon on my graveyard and wipe your board. Yeah, this is going to be very, very good. Again, not just for dragon tribal, but for other decks. They're like, yeah, I can get things in my graveyard, maybe read a mana deck. Oh, I got things. Yeah, I can get rid of this. Sure, why not? Okay, wipe your board. Goodbye. Yeah, this is a very good card. Next up. Green's got quite a bit, as usual. Analyze the Pollen Source for a single green mana. As just cost cast spell, you may collect evidence 8. Search life for a basic land. If evidence was collected instead, search life for a creature or land, reveal it, put in your hand and shuffle. This is an early in the game mana fixing card, making sure that you hit your land drops, which is great. And there are other cards out there that do this exact same thing, and not a lot of them see a lot of play. Unless you're in my Cody deck, and it's kind of weird. But anyways, this is a very good card because, again, not too much later, again, collecting evidence 8, that's a decent amount, but, like, maybe you need 2 cards in your graveyard to hit that, essentially. Not lands. But, yeah, being able to just say, like, oh, okay, cool, get rid of these things. 1 mana creature tutor, crazy good. So, yeah, a very, very, very good card. Yeah, I guess I said creature, but instead search life for a creature or land card. So again, it does upgrade that as well. So it can be any land, not just a basic. So you could go get like Gaia's Cradle too if you have that. So yeah, a very, very, very good card. Next up, Aftermath Analyst, a 1/3 elf detective for 2 mana, enters battlefield mill 3. So again, self-mill decks are already going to love that reanimation style decks. More importantly, they'll pay 3 and a green, sacrifice it, bring all land cards back from grave with the battlefield tapped. Basically like a world shaper essentially, but without like the, I would say, downside of needing it to die. I mean, if you have a way to sacrifice it, great. If you don't, you might not be able to get rid of it and actually get that effect. This one's like, no. You can pay for that effect whenever you want it. Again, if you've got a way, I mean, if this is in a deck, it's probably a self-mill type strategy. Get a lot of lands in your graveyard, get a lot of lands out, get a lot of landfall triggers potentially in that kind of a deck. A very, very, very good card. Next up, Sharp-Eyed Rookie. A 2/2 human detective, vigilance for 2 mana, but it's going to get quite larger. When a creature in the battlefield under control, if its power is greater than its power or its toughness, basically evolve. Then you're going to give it a counter, and you also investigate. So this will become a huge threat for you throughout the game, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And also, of course, giving you a bunch of clues that you can utilize for, drawing cards, or also, utilize in an artifact-based strategy. A very good card throughout the game for you. Moving on. Oh my goodness. Okay. I'm glad they restricted this one to like green. So it's like, if you're playing a 1 or 2 color deck, sure. 3 color, you might not want to go for it, but maybe you can justify it. And past that, it's like, that's really tough to cast. Instant for green. Choose 1. Search left for a creature or land card revealed. Put one on the battlefield, tap it, say land, otherwise hand, then shuffle. Put a counter on target creature control, deals damage with power target creature don't control, exile target artifact or enchantment. All 3 are amazing. Even with just that first part, that's already amazing. Again, 3 mana, instant speed, tutor for a creature, amazing. Or land, which ramps you, gets it into play. Again, it doesn't say basic. Again, it's just any land. Go get that land, put it right onto the battlefield for 3 mana. Again, go get that Guy's Cradle, whatever it is, if you got the budget for that, or you proxy it. But yeah, very, very good. Or it's a removal spell for a creature, or it's a removal spell for an artifact or enchantment. It's a crazy good, flexible card. Yeah, I'm glad that they made that a restrictive casting cost. Next up, Audience Resource on a sorcerer for 2 in a green. Create a 0/1 plant creature token and draw cards equal to the number of different named creature tokens you control. Thank you, Wizards, for actually putting creature tokens on this, not just like, hey, yeah, clues. Hey, yeah, food. Hey, yeah, treasures. No, just creature tokens, but still, if you are in a token-based go-wide strategy, you don't really typically care if it's not like a tribal deck. You don't typically care what kind of creature tokens you're making. They could be elves, they could be plants, they could be soldiers, they could be anything. Does not matter. You don't care. So yeah, you're gonna have probably, make 1 at least, draw 1, but you're probably gonna be drawing 3+ consistently with this, potentially like even up to like 8, 9, 10. Like once you're set up properly, once you have a board state. And at that point, if you've got an army that big and you also cast this and draw 10, you probably win the game. A very good card. Next up, Slime Against Humanity. A really cool card that is basically just a build around card. Sorcerer for 3 mana. Create a 0/0 green ooze creature token with trample and put X counters on, where X is 2+ the total number of cards you own in exile in your graveyard that are oozes or named Slime Against Humanity. A deck can have any other cards named Slime Against Humanity. Again, one of these kind of like Dragon's Approach type of cards where it's a sorcery that is also like any number of the deck. It's going to be a cool build around card. You can do a lot of crazy things with this, like self-mill, essentially get rid of your library even, just like, oh cool, yeah, cast this and then make a massive ooze. Maybe in like an ooze fling deck is probably what I would do with this one, but a really cool one. Moving on, green gets the best things. Undergrowth Recon. Enchantment for 3 mana. At the beginning of your upkeep, return target land card from grave to the battlefield tapped. Thank goodness it says tapped. Because if not, it's going to be like, oh yeah, fetch land, crack, fetch land, crack, fetch land, crack. You can still do that. It's slower. That being said, like the new Capenna fetch lands, are going to be really good with something like this, where they just ETB, sacrifice, and then you go get that land. So it's like every single turn you're doing that. If you've got a mill strategy, if you've got a way to get lands in your graveyard like discard, it's also another way to ramp you. But yeah, at the very least, like fetch lane, even if it's slower, still very, very good. And again, if you got the right fetch lanes, like the new Capenna ones, that's crazy effective. So yeah, crazy ramp. Speaking of which, case locked, Hothouse, 4 mana, enchantment case, from replenish a land on each of your turns. That is already huge. To solve, you control 7 more lands. That's so easy to solve. You're in green. You're going to get there in no time at all. Solved, you may look at the top card of your library anytime, may play lands and cast creatures and enchantment spells from the top of your library. That could be your entire deck. If you just have, creature-based strategy, maybe some enchantments in there, lands, of course. Congratulations. The top of your library is now an extension of your hand. And again, if it is a land, cool, let's play that. Oh, it's another land. Oh, cool, let's play that because I get to play additional land. That is massive. This is huge. Such a good card again for ramp decks, for landfall decks, for also like, hey, let's just use the top of our library as a second hand. Just a really, really good card. Moving on to multicolor though. Topplegang Source for XXX green and a blue for each of X target permanents. Create X tokens or copies of that permanent. This is a game-ending card. This is not for every deck, obviously, but it's like, hey, if you're in Simic, you probably have a lot of ways to ramp very effectively, very efficiently, and all of a sudden you're casting this for an absurd amount of mana. I mean, again, at a base level, not that great at 5. It's like, okay, copy one thing, not efficient. But once you go up each step, again, once you go to 8, that is 2 things, times 2, that is 4. Then once you go up to 11, 3 times 3 is 9. Once you go up to, my goodness, like 14 mana, that is just game-ending amounts of things that you are getting. Doesn't have to be your own permanents, can be your opponent's permanents. You could even just copy lands, okay? And you would do crazy things with this, just an absurd amount of ramp as well. It's just a really, really good card. I would definitely build a deck around this and just use copy spells too with it too. So have fun with that. Swarm Intelligence, lovely. Oh, goodness. This is a card where, again, it's like, how is this an uncommon? Okay. Flotsam, let's do that first. Mill 3 cards, Investigate. That's not why you're playing this card most likely. Jetsam is the side, though, where it's like, my goodness. 6 mana, each opponent mills 3 cards. Then you may cast a spell from each opponent's graveyard paying its mana cost. So those are there from graveyard exile instead. This like Delivering Primordial plus, essentially. Yeah, it's not an ETB that you can use and abuse, but hey, this one mills your opponents to give you options, and then it lets you cast anything. Cast does not have to be instant sorcery like Delivering Primordial. It could be anything. You cast a creature, you can cast enchantment, whatever you're doing. This is 6 mana. You get to cast 3 things for free. Crazy good. It's like not out of those cards that you milled. Oh, it's such a good card. Crazy good. Moving on, Incious Roots. Speaking of which, again, yet another uncommon that is nowhere near uncommon. Enchantment for 2 mana and Golgari. Creature tokens you control have tap, add 1 in any color. Absurd effect. Even if it was just that, it would probably just be a rare. Again, it's basically, oh goodness, my brain's not working on what it's called. There's an enchantment that's in green that basically does that, but gives all your creatures that right. Still, very effective, very good. Again, if you had a creature token-based strategy, it's like, oh, cool, get an absurd amount of mana. But on top of that, this gives you creature tokens. Whenever one or more creature cards leave your graveyard, create a 0/1 plant creature token, then put a counter on each plant you control. My goodness. Even, again, if you took out that last part where it's just like, no, you're just making a 0/1 plant. They don't get any bigger. Now, this is like, oh, cool, yeah, you just basically Avenger of Zendikar, essentially, if you're set up properly, getting more and more plants, getting counters on them, and also just making more and more mana. This is an absurd card. Speaking of which, War Leader's Call, enchantment for 3 mana, creature control ++1. Again, basically, again, old anthems like Glorious Anthem, Gaia's Anthem, just basically gave you that for 3 mana, right? But now on top of that, whenever creatures battle for control, 1 damage each opponent from this, that is an anthem plus impact tremors, all in one. My goodness. So again, for a creature token-based strategy especially, you're like, oh, okay, cool, I made 5 tokens. Oh, they're just 1/1s, but now they're 2/2s, doubling up on their power and toughness. And also, by the way, 5 damage each opponent. Not a big deal at all. Yeah, 15 damage in total. This is a crazy good card for the right deck. Next up, Leyline of the Guild Pact. Oh my goodness. Here we go. Enchantment for, well, green or for each of these. White, blue, black, red. If it's in your opening hand, again, the game on battlefield, like any other leyline, essentially, each non-land permanent you control is all colors, and lands you control are every basic land type in addition to their land into their other types. Gross. This is just a card that, yeah, if it was budget friendly, which it's never going to be, I would love it to be because I love 5 color, obviously. This is just start the game off with perfect mana fixing. Crazy good. I mean, even if you have to pay to get out and play, you're going to be able to do that. And at a certain point, you're in a 5 color deck. And then also, cool, now all of a sudden you're like, oh, perfect mana fix. You don't have to worry about anything that is huge, that is massive. And sure, I guess there's some things that really play into like each time permanent controls all colors that could play into certain things. That being said, what really matters again is that last part, perfect mana fixing that is potentially just free to get in play. That is massive. That is huge. It's never going to be budget. Anyways, moving on. Cease Desist. Cease is actually decently well. And instant speed, exile 2 cards from a single graveyard. Target player gains left draws a card. That's already just nice to have, okay? Graveyard hate can be huge in many circumstances. And it's like, oh, you're going to reanimate that? Let's not do that. Let's get rid of that permanently. And then also I'll gain 2 and draw a card to replace that. Desist, though, if you need it, hey, just draw artifacts and enchantments. If you got like creature-based strategy, you're like, I don't really care too much about artifacts and enchantments. Let's just wipe everything else out. So again, it's a flexible card that is not just a dead card because you always have that option to replace it when you need to. Moving on, let's go on some lands really quickly. We got some basically, I mean, we had like the Temple Scrylands. Now we've got the Surveil Lands, which are just, and again, in my opinion, slightly better. Again, because Surveil, getting a card in your graveyard versus on the bottom of your library is typically what you prefer. And just battlefield tabs for either color. Again, it is a mountain forest. So yeah, these cards are also basic land types. Enters battlefield, Surveil 1, or should I say land types. But yes, being able to, again, get some card selection off the top of your library. Yeah, it's a slow land because it comes to play tap, but still you're getting a lot of value out of this. And again, with a deck that can play with certain graveyard, with a graveyard essentially, or care about the graveyard at the top of the library, this is a huge card. Again, there's one for every single color combination, of course. That being said, the land that I really want to highlight and the card that is, I can guarantee you right now, going to see the most play out of every single card by far out of this set is Escape Tunnel. It's not going to be close. It won't be close at all. A land that has tap, sacrifice it, go get a base land on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Tap, sacrifice, target creature power 2 or less, can't be blocked this turn. It does not matter. If you have 0 creatures in your deck that have power 2 or less, it does not matter at all. This is strictly better than Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse, both of which I think Eddie looked it up at one point. I think Terramorphic Expanse has like 500,000 decks on EDH Rec. Evolving Wilds, again, they're both the exact same thing. Over 700,000. This is a better card than each of those, just strictly better. It does the exact same thing, and it also gives you something else. Again, even if you've got no creatures in your deck, it does not matter. There are some times where like, oh, an opponent like, oh, I'll give you a creature token of this. Cool. Maybe that creature token has power 2 less, can't be blocked. That can actually come in handy. Or more likely, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, you're swinging at that player. I don't like that player. I'll help get your creature through. I can sacrifice this to get your creature through, to put that last damage on that player, to take them out. It is a flexible card that typically is just going to be used like a Evolving Wilds, but also can have a game-changing play on it, again, just on a land. Just a better Evolving Wilds, better Terramorphic Expanse. I did not expect to see this, and we finally have seen it. Yeah, this is going to be the most played card from this set. Again, basically guaranteed. But now as this episode is coming to a close, it's time for me to get my thoughts from you. So let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on these amazing cards. Again, there's just so many of them. It's just a crazy, crazy good set with a lot of exciting cards. Yeah, I mean, a lot of new cards that I'm not going to say are staples, but I mean, Escape Tunnel's going to be a staple. That card's going to see an absurd amount of play, essentially. So yeah, let me know what cards I missed. Let me know what your favorite cards from this set are. What are you most excited about? Make sure you check out that card list link in the description below. And of course, as always, thanks again, and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.